Hello, hello, welcome. This is the One Great Work Warriors. We're back for an exciting discussion. We've been meeting very often and having these wonderful discussions. And today we're going to share with you something we've been talking about, which is dealing with the devil's advocate. Everyone who's come across these topics of freedom, of natural law, hermetic principles, Brandon, myself, Jim, Jerry, and Rick, and hopefully Derek will make it today. We've all come to very similar conclusions and realizations about these topics. And what we've found is when we discuss them with other people, friends, family, people we meet, we get some of the same arguments from people. And so we're going to kind of play the devil's advocate today and talk about how we deal with these common arguments, these devil's advocate arguments that we already get from everybody we try to talk about natural law, or trying to explain to people that the belief in authority is causing so many problems that it's making humanity go downhill in so many ways, what I call into the path of evil. But I'm going to hand it off to my man Brandon here, and because I know he has done a little better job preparing of how to discuss what do we mean by the devil's advocate.
Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful intro. Thank you, Rick, Jim, and Jerry for joining us. And yeah, hopefully Derek can join us later on. But yeah, what do we mean by this devil's advocate role? Because we've heard this term, used a lot, and a lot of times it's misrepresented. So, the way that I like to define it, it is the expression of contentious rhetoric to invoke or spark conversation or debate. And the reason why you want to have this conversation, because if you have this idea or this notion and you want to make sure that it holds weight, then you kind of have to weigh it to make sure that it's going to stand. You have to kind of, like show evidence or, like kind of have that skeptic role to make sure that it's going to hold. And this term, devil's advocate, comes from this mainstream understanding out of the Catholic Church. And the reason for that was when someone was going to be canonized, then they would find a priest or another clergy to play this devil's advocate role. And the reason for that is just to make sure that this canonization or this individual knows, what they are talking about, and is very knowledgeable. So this person, as they are playing this devil's advocate role, they are held the skeptic. They are to bring information and evidence, and it's not to really attack one's character, but you are to pretty much point at what is being presented, and you can try to dismantle it. And one of the main things are the are the reasons for this role is to spark conversation, to spark ideas, to create conversation, and to see if this position that is being taken or held is valid. So this is actually a very important tool to have, because even though it comes out of this mainstream narrative of the Catholic Church, I want to say it's actually quite older, because it was used a lot in forms of debate. And I've always kind of felt this role. If you are familiar with the Hegelian dialectic, the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, then I always looked at like the devil's advocate is almost kind of like the antithesis, because you have this held discussion or this idea or this notion being held the thesis. So you always try to counter or have this counter argument, the skeptic, just to make sure that this thesis will hold weight. So then therefore you would bring in this antithesis or this held devil's held advocate role. Then therefore once all this information is put out, then you can come to a reasonable, logical understanding. And remember, in order to play this devil's advocate role, you don't actually have to believe in this form of skepticism. You don't actually have to believe in this role that you are bringing to the table. You were just trying to make sure that this notion or this idea or this standpoint is very valid by challenging it to make sure that it is going to hold and it is going to stand. So I'll pass that on to whoever wants to take over.
Thanks, Brandon. That was fantastic. The devil's advocate, I think too, it's we each want to have our own devil's advocate in our own head that allows us to compare and contrast when we're taking in information. If you can't argue with it, you're just going to be like a computer, just taking the information that someone's giving you and just repeating it back. So, let's question these things. So, one of the things that I'm always trying to put out there to people is that we need to dispel this belief in authority. It's one of the main problems we have in the world, and it causes so much evil. But when you talk about the word anarchy, people get all confused, and they think anarchy means chaos, and they think anarchy means if we get rid of all the rulers, that things are just going to go crazy. And that's basically the first argument that I would like to start this discussion with, because I think it's one of the most common things I've heard from people when I try to present the idea of voluntarism, that we don't need a government, that we don't need people to rule over us, to be in charge of us, to make laws for us. Man's law is not a good thing. When I present that concept to people, they reject that concept because they say, well, the world would just go, if we didn't have a government or we didn't have rules and laws, the world would go to shit, and there'd be like a Mad Max scenario, or other people call it gangs of New York. Just gangs are going to take over. It's going to be complete chaos. So, that's a good argument that people always make anytime you talk about anarchy or voluntarism. So we're going to discuss that subject a little bit. Anybody want to talk first on that? Jerry, you want to give us your thoughts on that a little bit, maybe?
Yes, I just want to say that it sounds like that standpoint is coming out of a place from fear. So instead of looking at it logically and with intuition, they're sort of their fear is getting the best of them, and they're seeing this horrible picture that there's just no way out. And as we know, fear leads to chaos always, unless you handle your fear and are brave enough to practice courage and then see the way out. Um, use your own brain, use your own imagination, your 2 cents in order to figure out the solutions. So I would like to say that the people who think anarchy means chaos are the ones who are just um, what do you call it? They're lacking that knowledge. So we are here to tell you that anarchy means absence from rulers, and that's all it means, folks. So I'll pass it on to whoever would like to go next.
Could say a few things. So definitely, only come across like I'm 48 years old, and it's not until like a little less than 2 years ago where I really started to contemplate these things for myself, morality, objective morality. And I would have even thought the same thing that anarchy would mean chaos, without really thinking it, because I was just stuck in that programmed belief. Like, and now it's kind of like I'm still processing, and I understand like when I have conversations with people that they're not going to get it right away because it took me a long time. Um, but it's like so yeah, I've been having conversations with people and it's been a struggle, but it's just what I was going to say is it's kind of like I feel like I was in a cult. I'm trying to explain to people that they're in a they're in a cult, and like it's hard to like tell people they're in a cult and get them not to believe it. But that's just kind of the experience of interacting with people and trying to you know spread this information. Just recently I had started a YouTube channel, and I had a interaction with one of the in the comments, and that really stirred me up, like as far as how I got to interact with this person and like all their like kind of um you know claims like against what I was saying, and going as far as it's just everyone's opinion that they own their body and all these kinds of things, and like I have to, it really got me thinking, like how can I respond to this person and how much they're stuck in that belief system. And but basically that I realized that I'm it took me this long to get this. I see how important, I realize how important it is and to care about this, and to spread the information, the knowledge, and but understanding that it's going to take time for people to process it anyway. And that's it for now. Pass it to Rick.
Thank you. Great points, guys. Both of you, Jerry and Jim, you guys make great points, and this is something that I come across a lot. People playing definitely the devil's advocate on me. They come at me when I start talking about these things. That's what I put on a couple of my slides that I submitted. That is what people are saying to me. These are the things that people say to me, and they believe that without authority, you know, who will uphold the law? Without authority figures, and without government, who will make our laws? And then without government, who will manage our infrastructure? Those are the things that a lot of people come to me back at me with. And I definitely think that it's what Jerry was saying, that people are in this state of fear. They can't imagine when you tell people about a world without government, without somebody ruling over them, they can't picture it. They can't see a world like that. That would be at least not chaotic, and what we're talking about, and that's kind of what they say, and it's definitely, I think, this belief in government and authority is a cult. I think you make great points when you say that it's definitely a cult. I mean, people have that cult mindset that when they talk about it, and they really have a hard time, and I try to explain to them that this can exist, this things can exist without authority over us, and without them guiding our lives and controlling everything that we do, because I mean, they got laws for everything now, and people just have to get out of that mindset is what I try to explain to them. It's really a difficult, people have a difficult time. And with the point about anarchy too, when I talk about anarchy, everybody thinks that it means Mad Max scenario. That's what everybody I talk to, they're like, that's what's going to happen, it's going to be anarchy, and they don't even know the meaning of the word. So I think it's important that we educate people on the meaning of words that they're even saying, because they just have this Hollywood version and of what it is. So that's my thoughts so far.
Yeah, I'll jump in right here because usually what it is it's a projection. Because a lot of
Hmm.
people don't take accountability. A lot of people don't take have responsibility. A lot of people don't really focus on how the shadow work. Then they project the external world based on how they are going to behave and how they are going to act. So the reason why they say, things are going to spiral into chaos is because they themselves see their own self as the ones who would be doing, have that chaos. So then they project it as though everyone else is going to act just like they are acting. So it's a major form of projection because they lack self-discipline and they lack self-control. So then, therefore, because they have that collective hive mentality, and they're going to think that, hey, everyone is just going to act like the way that I'm acting because I'm acting the exact way that everybody else is acting. So yeah, it's a projection, it's out of fear, and then two is out of programming too, because how this is a response that has come from majority of the people. So how can all how can all of these unique individuals have that same response? So then too, there is indoctrination and mind control behind it too, and how the pre-programming, because we all know that the words have been obfuscated and through entertainment and all of this stuff, all of this negative form of rhetoric that has been injected into their thought forms, into their thought patterns, and into their minds, then therefore they take that as being reality in and of itself. So, like Jerry said, it's fear, it's projection, and then two, it's just simply mind control. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it really goes to show, Brandon, like you pointed out, how much that Hollywood and these movies affect us. Because I don't know how many times I've had this conversation with people. Like, sometimes they'll start off where they'll talk about something they don't like about the government, or getting taxed, or they'll be complaining about some aspect of this situation, and I'll key off of that, and I'll be like, yeah, why do we need government anyway? I don't want it at all. It's slavery. And when I say that, then people, well, you can't just get rid of it, because then it would be, and they always say it would be Mad Max, or they say it would be Gangs in New York or something like that, just a bunch of gangs. And I mean, like, on the one side, okay, talk about devil's advocate, like, I can kind of agree with them, because to an extent, like, if tomorrow all government just stopped and there was no authority around the whole world in the snap of a fingers, as if that could happen, yeah, we would have some problems, because people are addicted and trained to be totally used to living in this cage. It'd be like, a lot of times when people spend their lifetime in jail and they get out, it's so scary outside, they don't know what to do with themselves. It'd be like a fish that spent its whole life in a fish tank, and then you just dropped it in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's going to have a hard time adapting to a world of freedom. And so we're trying to describe a concept to people that, it's basically all of our imagination, because we've all lived in a world that's been completely based on indoctrination and dogma and authoritarianism. So from a young age, schools, doctors, parents, all these people are ramming their ideas down our throat, and often not giving us the option or the choice to say, I don't want to be part of this. No one ever asked me if I wanted to be part of this country, or this idea, or this constitution, or any of these things. And I'm not saying they're all bad. Like, there are some good things about the constitution, there's some good things about our country, but don't I get the choice? If I was born here, that means that the universe put me here, the divine creation put me here. And then you got people here in this area, in this zone, where the divine creation of infinity brought me exactly where it wanted it. And you got people here that be like, no, this is ours. You got to pay us money, and you got to do things the way we already got it set up and our parents did, or else, and that's taking away choice, which is the most, talk about divine, the most divine thing about what we are is beings that have choice. And so, even if it is the Mad Max scenario that we're looking at, it's still the direction we have to go, because it's what's right, is to give people the choice to choose what they want to do or not. Now, that being said, realistically, it's not all going to change overnight. Governments aren't going to go away in one moment. If we do start to change the mentality of people, we can start treating each other with respect sooner than later. And we still have the opportunity to do that in a pretty peaceful way right now. So, I feel like we could keep arguing this scenario some more, but I would just challenge people to look at your day-to-day life. And how often is there somebody actually there, standing there, pointing your finger, telling you to stop at the stop sign, or telling you to follow the laws? 99% of the time, it's your own mind that's telling you what you're supposed to do or what you're not supposed to do, and there's not anyone else around, any external authority, to actually tell you or stop you from doing things. It's all based in belief system. So every time there's been an accident on the road, or something goes wrong in your life, what happens? People figure it out, and they don't need a president or a governor or any of these things to figure it out. um, I don't know. Did anybody else want to jump in on the Mad Max scenario and the
Yeah.
chaos
Yeah.
anarchy theme? Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I'll jump in, and mind you, it's okay to have these ideas. It's okay, to throw this rhetoric out because that's the whole point of the devil's, advocate. So we're not attacking anyone, who may retort, hell with the whole hell devil's hell advocate, scenario, but it can easily be, dismantled with just a little bit of reason and logic because we have chaos now with these authoritarian, these forms of authority we have here. And then two, the thing that really gets me when how when people throw this out is the abandonment factor is they don't want to um, leave mommy and daddy, so they still want how the government to, feed them or, clothe them or give them housing. It's the parental abandonment issue that is a factor when people bring this up to a larger, degree. Because in actuality, what they are saying is, you mean I have to grow up? You mean I have to take, have responsibility? You mean I have to make decisions and choices for myself like a big boy or a big girl? So it's projection, it's fear, and it's the parental abandonment. But when someone brings this argument to the table, it should not be shunned because these are topics are, that we have to, talk about because even in a free society, there's still going to be forms of chaos. Chaos in and of itself isn't inherently bad. It's just when it's man-made forms of chaos, of the wars, of the theft, of how the rapes and all of that stuff. Because there are natural forms of chaos, and then you have man-made forms of chaos. So you're never really ever going to 100% get rid of chaos because we live in the physical domain. But it's about trickling down that chaos to as little as possible, so we can do as less harm as possible, and therefore we can go on about our daily lives and doing things with loved ones and families, because there's always going to be people who are going to always trample on rights and freedom. Sadly, we never really ever are going to 100% get rid of that. But what we can do is learn these core principles, then learn to adhere to these principles and boundaries and these teachings of objective morality, freedom, and natural law, and these occult teachings. And therefore, we can learn to live in harmony with nature and our fellow neighbors.
Um, yeah, so like where I live in the suburbs of New York, it's a pretty upscale area. And a lot of the people I know, friends and family, they all are doing pretty well financially. And so it's hard to convince them that they're like living in slavery, you know? And it- but so like they're definitely not gonna want to cop to it like when their lives are so comfortable, and they can afford to go out to eat a couple nights a week and things like that. And but I try to like explain to them like this, like the relativism of it is like, yeah, like you say, gangs of New York, and like I think of the mafia all the time and how the government is just like the mafia, and we're contributing to that, like in the work that we do, and the money goes towards that. And like I think that's just a really like important, like a seed. And we always talk about this stuff, but that's a big one, like to plant that seed about the relativism of the government is just like the mafia, and they're harming people, and we're contributing to that. And I guess, because they're just stuck in the belief system, like we keep saying, and beliefs get people in trouble, of course. But I do it when it comes to beliefs for me. I mean, I'm crazy enough to believe that we can evolve the consciousness, like Brandon is saying, to that, you know, um, lower entropy. Uh, um, like that's what I believe in. I do believe in humanity. Like I think that we can, like, is if more and more people can really grasp this, that, what we're contributing to, and the government is really like the mafia, and it does fucking matter that, yeah, why are they allowed to get away with this? And they have us like contributing to it. But you gotta get people to really see that they are contributing to evil, and that's a tough sell. But because, like I said in the beginning, their lives are they got a good life as far as financial, and so they don't want to cop to it. So it's just that's the struggle that I find. Like a lot of the people I know, that they would never consider themselves slaves because they're doing just fine. Like they can make enough and still be a slave. Like that they're like, oh, that's fine with me. So
It's a really good point, Jim. I've noticed that quite a bit. A lot of folks are like, "Hey, I'm happy. I'm good. What's there to complain about? Why are you complaining?" And that's a very self-centered view of the world when we know that there's, out there there's children being kidnapped on a mass scale and people being raped and being used as, human cattle, you know, much less the way we treat animals, but there's humans being treated like in really terribly ways on a mass scale. And just because some of these wealthy people we know can get away with living a really comfortable lifestyle that maybe they shouldn't be quite so comfortable with, because it actually is chaos when you drive right now through a lot of cities and there's tent cities that go on for blocks and blocks and blocks, and there shouldn't be that many people that don't have a home, that are on drugs and all messed up psychologically. And that says something about our society and the way we're doing things, that it's not working. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there if it was working. So, Jerry or Rick, you guys got any last comments on this topic before we move into the next topic?
I just think you hit it perfectly. I think everybody's hitting it perfectly. That it, it's so it's such a it's a tricky discussion. It really it is, and it's an important one to have. And I just I want to kind of save it for the end because I kind of got what I want to say at the end. So, but I definitely am agreeing with all of you guys are saying. It's so important to have. I think this back and forth is. I was saying before we even started recording that I do that with one of my friends. We go back and forth a lot. We do this devil's advocate thing a lot because I think it brings out great conversation. It brings great answers to the forefront, and I agree with what Brandon and everybody is saying, that people have to start doing this. It always boils down, it seems, to doing the work on yourself and taking responsibility for yourself. And I think people have to start doing that. And of course, if you haven't done the work on yourself, you're never going to picture a world with without authority over top of you and guiding you and making these laws that they're just crazy. They have no authority in these laws. I mean, it's just crazy that people make them and follow them, but you're never going to picture that if you're not doing the work and learn what objective morality is, learn what principles are, learn what natural law is. If you don't even know what any of these things are and know the true meaning of them, of course you're never going to see a world where these apply. And I think you guys know what I mean, I hope. But you have to learn these things and do the work on yourself before you can even imagine a world that we're talking about. I think that's just the foundation that people need to get on. That's my thoughts.
Thanks, Rick.
I'll just pitch in real quick. I just wanted to say, like, you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? Like, red pill is courage, blue pill is fear. Your choice. I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Well, I'll take that. I'll take that red pill. I'm a pretty curious guy, and I like to ask a lot of questions. I always have. I like to think about things, but some things that we think about are kind of dangerous, and they lead us down paths that can be scary. And I think that's kind of what happens with some of these discussions that I've had with people is, if you're really used to living your life or making decisions based on, um, like what someone else told you, or a structure or a dogmatic thing, then it's really scary to have to figure it out completely all by yourself. And I think that leads well into the next topic where we're going to bring up, which is conjecture. Brandon, you want to introduce the term conjecture for us, please?
Yeah. Man, we've all heard this one. Chris, that's just your opinion. Chris, that's just conjecture. Or Rick, you're saying that morality is objective. That's just your opinionated, you know, have belief. So let's define what conjecture is. Conjecture is an opinion that is formed or a belief that is formed by incomplete information. So pretty much it's just a form of blind belief, but you take your opinion as something more than what it actually is. So when you're stating something that is actually true, that's not conjecture. So like when we're talking about freedom and morality being held objective, we are not coming from a opinionated standpoint. We are coming from truth. So one of the main things that people will try to regurgitate is you're only saying that because that is your opinion, or that is conjecture. So you're taking that as though it is true, yet uh they can't separate belief from truth. It would be like me saying, hey, every single one of us are going to die. Every single one of us is going to pass away. Imagine someone saying that, oh, that's just that's just how conjecture. No, that is such a thing as objective truth. So that's what conjecture is when people take opinions and they base their opinions on unsubstantial or incomplete facts, or truth, or information.
Thanks, Brendan, for introducing that. Excellent. So how are we going to apply that to the argument that someone might make to us when we're having a discussion and we're trying to present, let's say, natural law, for instance? um, I'm going to try to say that everything we do has a consequence in this world, and that the way that people act actually dictates the experience that we're going to have as a race. We're going to have a experience of misery and sadness if lots of humans are practicing evil upon another. And someone who says, well, that's not the case, that's not the way things work, they might argue with me and say that that's conjecture, that I'm just making that up, you know? And I can say, you can test this out scientifically in your life and you can see what happens. Natural laws is what we're experiencing every day, is the consequences of our actions. So why is it that people could live in a world where they think that there's no connection from the things they do to the things they happen? You know, they're living in a world based on dogmatic thinking, that what people say is what happens, or what TV says is what happens, or just choose something that feels good and stick with that. What are some of the experiences you've had in this discussion with conjecture? Rick, can I pass it to you next?
Oh, sorry. I've had I've had a lot actually. I've had people basically what you're saying, Chris. I've had the same thing when I get talking about natural law or anything. They'll say, "Well, that's what you think." Like why are you putting that on me, kind of thing. So I deal with that too, and it's a great discussion. But I definitely I don't know. I think a lot of things are adding to conjecture what people think and their beliefs. I think social media's got a big footprint in that, into what people are believing and throwing out on other people. So it's a definitely something I've dealt with and I deal with, but I think there's a lot of things contributing to it that are making people kind of questioning things like that. If you know what I mean, it's interesting.
I almost kind of see this mentality as like a small, minute form of solipsism, because when it all boils
Uh,
down to, you have to you have to come to an understanding: is truth objective or is it subjective? Because when someone's saying, "Oh, that's conjecture," then hell, again, not only is it a form of projection, but they are putting more emphasis on a subjective form of belief and not an objective form of truth. So they're saying you're only saying that because that is your opinion and you believe it to be true. No, it's not about anybody's hell opinion, because we can have all different forms of hell opinion and they be so far away from the truth. So I see it as a smaller form or coming out of a branch of solipsism, because hell, again, because they think a certain way, they think that everyone else thinks like them, when in fact, no, I do not think like you, or how people who are trying to have these conversations do not think like you do. So there is such a thing as objective truth. So it has nothing to do with conjecture. It has nothing to do with, her belief. It has nothing to do with subjective reality per se. The subject can come to understand the object. How the microcosm can come to understand how the macrocosm, because there is this dynamic, there is this flowing relationship. So it is not about this subjective opinion, because you and I don't get to determine what is true. How just like you and I don't really get to determine how what is false. It's about weighing the evidence and taking the facts and then using that to interpret objective reality. So that's what it really boils down to. So hell, again, you have a bunch of people who have regurgitated this same response. It comes back down to conditioning and mind control. And there's no problem with someone, having this response, because it sparks conversation. It sparks, it sparks how debate. But if you truly done your homework, then you should be able to dismantle this argument. Because all you have to do is just, have this one-on-one, have a relationship and start asking them questions and really get them to start talking, and then they will start to dismantle their own form or their own answer, with just time, with just questioning, with just reason, with just simple thinking, and not just a reaction, because really what they are doing is just reacting, because they haven't really sat down and studied and took in this information and really thought for themselves. So they are just reacting based on their own form of programming.
I'll jump in for a sec and then hand it to Jim. I was just thinking about, on the subject of conjecture, like one thing that I think is really difficult about natural law is that it very much is an inner journey. And Rick was just talking about that. It always comes back to the self and knowing thyself and doing the inner work. What does that actually mean? Being able, like we talked about in the beginning, to have two different arguments in your head and to reason something out and think about it and ask yourself, am I about to do, is it a right thing or is it a wrong thing? You should be able to solve that problem on your own without a piece of paper or someone else's advice. Not to say it's not a good idea to get people's advice, but we have an inner moral compass that's built into us. And someone else might argue with me and say, that's conjecture. There's not really a such thing as that. But I know in my personal experience that I do have an inner compass and that I can find answers and I can discern truth because I've experienced it, just like mathematics, over and over and over. Every time when I add 1 + 1, I always get 2. And in my own self, every time I've ever sought answers, I've found them. If I go through an honest process, and I can't tell you how to do that in your own personal life because only you can figure that out. So you could call my process conjecture all you want, and that's fine, go ahead. But your process in your life and getting those answers should not be conjecture. You should know what's right or wrong. You don't just accidentally, whoops, I accidentally killed somebody, whoops, I accidentally raped somebody. Oh well, it's no. We make decisions and we know what we're doing even when we're drunk. As drunk as people get, they know they're doing stupid stuff. And so that's all. That kind of little thing popped in my head. I'll pass it to Jim.
You're on mute, Jim.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I looked up the word conjecture quick, and it says when information is lacking, your mind will fill in the gaps. And that's what I find, like I've been learning a lot lately, like when you bring up these topics and what it's people's natural, like in our psychology, like to go into that fight or flight. So they're just gonna like either try to run away from it or like just come up with anything to fill in the gaps to get away from like these like confronting subject of the truth, so that's what my take on conjecture. I've been learning about the psychology of why people react that way. They go into conjecture and yeah, then like you said, like asking these questions, learning about that, and Larkin Rose has been with the candles in the dark, and he's coming out with a newer seminar, which I'm interested in that. Like, how do you know, what's the proper way to deal with the psychology of why people go into this conjecture? And so I think that's pretty cool. And pass it to Jerry.
Awesome roundtable discussion, guys. Conjecture. I just think that people are just, brainwashed into thinking a certain way. It's what the schooling system does. They just put you in a uniform. You need to get your hair cut. You can't speak out. You can't think for yourself. Ask a question. God forbid, you'll get smacked with a ruler. And then at home, it's just indoctrination over centuries. So yeah, it's just acknowledging that, not running away from it, because I think once you ask a question, you might even get the answer before you even finish asking the question. And people run away from that, from the truth. But I have to say I've become, best friends with the truth. Every morning, I essentially start my breath work and I set my intention, which is to serve truth. And my life has just improved dramatically, like times 1,000. So people like that tell me, oh, what I'm saying is just conjecture. Um, I have taken a look at this from within. So as I'm doing the shadow work per se, questioning it, making sure I'm not doing a wrong action, and I'm not putting out false information. So I, have came to that conclusion thanks to the trivia method. I took in this knowledge, I processed it, and now I'm speaking it out with my other friends. So I'll pass it to whoever wants to go.
Thanks, Jerry. That's fantastic. I always love hearing each of you speak on these topics. It helps solidify my own thoughts, and sometimes it brings into question kind of a new way of looking about things. And as Brandon said, for listeners, this is really, you don't have to agree with us. This is an opportunity to motivate and inspire you to think about it on your own. And do you agree or disagree, and why? When you go through that process, like Jerry's talking about, going through that process, gather the information, go back and forth with it and see where it takes you, and then you draw conclusions. And something I've been thinking a lot about recently is something I'm starting to call spiritual mathematics. and that this is a very much a scientific process that we're going through life, where we learn each day what things we do that don't work out well. You know, we do things that we call wrong, and we realize that, oh man, when I do that wrong thing, there's negative effects. And that's very real. You know, reality is real. That's why we call it reality, you know? And so that's what we're going to talk about next is moral relativism. And we're also talking about a specific branch of moral relativism that I hear about all the time, which is cultural relativism. It's even in the books they teach kids in school. And it's kind of teaching the idea that, you know, things are only wrong or right depending on where they happen. So, in other words, you could whip a kid in a different country where whipping kids is acceptable, but not here in this country where we don't believe in whipping kids. So, the only thing that makes it wrong or right is the laws of the land. And that's what a lot of people think, that laws are just made by who's in charge, and whoever's in chargest gets to make the rules. And depending on what the rules are, that's what's right or wrong. So, is that true or not? I'd like to hear your guys' point of view. I'm going to bring up, by the way, all these wonderful slides were made by these group members here that are sharing their wonderful ideas. And I really appreciate everyone's thought they put into these slides and bringing them for this show. I'll hand it off to Brandon.
Yeah, this is one of the fucked hard, because this one like really just grinds my gears. You know how when I hear it, because not only does it pertain to location, people say because morals change over time. So because you grew up in a certain time, then it may have been right or wrong. But in today's day, in time, it has changed. Or they'll say, oh, it changes because you are a certain class, or because you are a certain sect in society. So when you have this form or this term cultural relativism, it it pertains to time, class, her location, sect, status, country, her location, uh, and they're saying that morals are her relative based on pretty much her location, and that right there is an extreme how dangerous notion, because you can justify anything. And hell again, I get why people say this from their conditioning. I'm not saying these people should be hell attacked. It just grinds my gears because you can easily dismantle this incorrect hell notion, because they're coming from a notion based on their programming, because we've all been indoctrinated by the state. And from the moment you have been born in a moral relativistic cultural relativistic society, because every society that we have is based on hell cultural relativism. Hold on. Derek gonna be joining, so yep. So
Cool.
with this notion, you can justify pretty much any form of behavior, and then you can change right form of behaviors into wrong forms of behaviors. So, Derek, what's going on?
Can I just add in on that, Brandon? Like
Yo,
that's what drives me crazy, Brandon, about is that when you look through history, like I've always found this crazy that at one time in history, a certain action or whatever it be, drinking, whatever, marijuana is illegal, and then somebody can just make on with the swipe of a pen, all of a sudden it's a right. And it just every time this goes on, it's kind of like what you were saying. It just grinds your gears. It just really gets to me that people even think there's any legitimacy in that. It just sorry, I'm just had to add that in. It
If
just
people
drives me.
start drinking marijuana, we definitely need a law against that.
Well, yeah,
That's
I
just
eat
too
it.
dangerous.
Well, I eat it. I mean, it's not far from drinking. But it's just it just does it grinds my gear. I get what Brandon's saying. Like they can just change things on with the swipe of a pen and on whatever they prefer on a whim. It just and people buy into it.
Yeah. So Derek, you made it. Glad you came, brother.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for having me aboard, gentlemen. How's it going?
Great. How are
Good.
you?
Good,
Sorry
how
to
are you?
interrupt and be so late, but yeah.
Hey, well, how about I put you on the spot? Because
Yeah,
we
please.
we all went around and we talked a little bit about our devil's advocate scenario. We talked about the Mad Max scenario, you know, that people say that, you know, if we work towards anarchy, if we work towards getting rid of rulers, or we didn't have government, without government, well, who would make the laws and everything would go crazy. So since you're here now, I'm gonna put you on the spot and have you talk a little bit about that, and show those slides one more time.
Sure, yeah. So Rick, I feel you, brother, and it grinds my gears too. And my gears were well in good operations, getting off a 17-hour road trip, but you know, looking at like a bunch of signs being repetitive, like buckle up, it's the law, and all this stuff, and yeah, man's law and all these things, and oh, if we abandon those, yeah, Mad Max is gonna come into town. But did any of you ask why Max is so mad, anyways? Or has anyone?
No, we haven't asked that.
Oh, that's all right. I'm not here to provide any theories behind that, but yeah, maybe he's mad that things are way more chaotic than they should be. Just like the absence of coercion, and that puts people in under duress and in a unnatural state because we have to obey man's law and this and that. So am I trying to be the devil's advocate to say why like a anarchist or voluntarist society is going to turn into Mad Max, or am I responding to that?
Either way, we're just talking through it, you know, trying to get people thinking, try to inspire people to continue the conversation.
Well, yeah, well, you know, like the taxes they're paying for the roads and everything, you know, like no one can think beyond, you know, just, well, you know, we pay into these, you know, systems or whatever, like whoever's using it and this and that. It gets more complicated with interstate highways, and you have these small towns and they have to like pay for all this pothole work because they got semis running through it, you know. But like we don't need, you know, the government to provide those services. We can have those. I mean, we're all just people anyway. So it's just a system that, you know, it's like a debt-based system pretty much that, you know, taxes us to death. Was there any taxes in the Mad Max, by the way? Sorry.
Gas, you got to pay your gas tax, man. If you know, if I get a hold of you and I chain you to my car, then I get all your gas. That's the way it went down in Mad Max, as I recall.
Hmm. Yeah, and some of the gas tax pays for the maintenance of the roads and all that jazz. Something that I don't always.
Well, you know, I mean, and another thing we talked about is, like Jim was bringing up, a lot of people are used to their security and they think, hey, you know, my life's not so bad. I don't feel like I'm a slave. I'm not in slavery. I don't know what you're talking about. And we're trying to explain to them natural law, and that, you know, even if you're part of this system, you're actually doing the wrong to other people, especially if you're benefiting from stealing, which is, you know, what this system essentially is, you know, is stealing. It's stealing your gas. It's telling you if you want to go from point A to B, you got to pay because we're the gang in charge. We're the authority, right? And we're trying to tell people that we don't need that, you know, and they're saying, well, everything's going to go to shit. And we're saying, look, it's a spiritual question. Even if it does go to shit, we still have to do the right thing because it's principles. We got to be principles and objective morality. And they're saying, well, that's just conjecture. You're just making that up. So we talked about this concept of conjecture a little bit too. So I'll just run through that one more time to let you catch you up a little bit, Derek. The idea of conjecture, you want to make any comment on that? You know, people saying that we're just making this stuff all up and that it's not solid.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many logical fallacies and just like the ignorance of certain concepts that are just, they've been out there for a long time. I mean, we get bits and pieces of it from all over the place, including like religion with the whole golden rule and this and that. And like, imagine if people just, you know, lived by the golden rule. We could have more of a hermetically sealed society, nothing like a Mad Max scenario. So conjecture, my grammar's pretty bad. No, just kidding. So is it an argument? It seems like yeah, it's just a logical fallacy that the they're just saying how it's not going to work based off their predisposition belief system, which is kind of limiting, and they're not giving it any kind of proper independent thought, like independent from what they were taught and what the, it's like, use your imagination, that magi nation, wielding a little bit of magic within, and being a little bit creative, and like thinking about how these sacred principles, like, oh wow, like, do they not think that sounds like something interesting or important to, like, principles are first things, right? Principia. So now I'd kind of be like, whoa, yeah, first things first, and I'm not even out the gates properly, kind of thing. Like, I might want to check that out. So, and then we could go back to them and be like, so what's so great about the government, like, like, are your politicians, are they, like, are they hitting you up? Are they making sure you're okay and all that stuff? Or are they just spinning wheels and the same cycle continues?
Yeah, I love that your answers just coming in fresh, Derek, are in a lot of alignment with some of the things we were saying. We were all talking about,
Oh,
the
cool.
importance of coming to these realizations on our own, and that you can't just take anything that someone says. You got to figure it out on your own, and I feel like that's where you were going with those too. So we kind of came around now to where you were talking about moral relativism and cultural relativism, and I really think that these ideas that have been sold and they've been pumped out through movies and music and various religions have trained people to think in a dogmatic way and to accept that you can't have safety and security without a certain amount of evil. We have to accept a level of evil. And I think that's what people really are okay with, that we're going to accept this level of evil government to own us to a little bit. They can own us a little bit so that we can all be more safe and secure. And that's basically what people are accepting. And I don't think that's something good to accept. So I'm going to pass the mic to who's ready to talk next. Where were we at? Rick, you were just talking when Derek jumped in. Do you have anything else to say, Rick, before we pass it to someone else?
I'm gonna go on a rant if I do, because
Feel free. I mean,
it just, like I was saying, it drives me crazy that people buy into this. That's the greatest thing that the government's ever done, is deceive people and make them believe that we need them. I look at that and I'm like, that they really duped people to believe that, to really buy into that, to the point where people are like, they'll pick a side and they will dig a line in the sand and they are gonna die on that hill. That's how great this deception goes, and this belief that we need them. That they've done a great masterful job at that, to the point where they're dividing people and keeping us divided. And then we buy into this belief that we need them to make these laws, that, oh my god, if they don't make these laws, if they don't govern over us and take care of us, the whole world's gonna go to hell. And we need them. And that's the lie that they've put over people, this deception. And just really, it's the heart of the problem. Like one of them. And that's my thoughts on that. I'll pass it.
People have duped themselves. People have
Right.
duped themselves. How we can't give all the credit to how the government. The people have duped themselves because they continue to, continue to stay in these forms of negative thought patterns. So, how we were talking about how cultural relativism, it's like how Pasio said, is natural law, seminar. If you break it down on a one health versus one, a individual towards another individual, you can easily dismantle these forms of arguments. And how I see why people continue to have regurgitate that, because like Derek said, it always comes back to how the programming. It always comes back how to the programming, and because they've heard it possibly millions of times, it's everywhere. This whole form of cultural relativism, it is everywhere. So, how they're just operating based on what they see with just their, 5 cents, her reality, and don't really go deeper. And that's really how the problem, when it comes to trying to relay these concepts with other people, is people just want to stay surface level or just focus on, like, physical stuff and not go deeper. You have to continue to go deeper, not deeper in the form of external, but deeper in the form of the internal, like how Rick said earlier, how shadow work, uh, how information, occult knowledge, how laws help nature. Then you can really start to grasp. So I'm gonna pass it on to Jim because like he's thinking hard about something right now.
Well, I mean, it makes me sad that most of my life, I always felt like, things are fucked up and the government's corrupt and why are they allowed to get away with it? And, this term moral relativism is like, I never heard it like before until a couple years ago. And even if you try to like, if you bring that term up, moral relativism, people don't automatically understand what it is. But I feel like it's so important, like for people to really process, like they said before, the government really is like the mafia, but only worse. And like, if people can really sit with themselves and process that and say like, really get that's so fucked up. And like I said earlier, how that like we're all contributing to this mafia, and if we don't contribute to them, then they'll hurt us. They'll put us in a prison. And if we tried to do that, like we would be wrong, but they're right. It's like all these kind of things. Once you start really thinking about it, it's like, wow, like, but yet you're led to believe that like, the government's great and be all patriotic in that. So, but it's so like I'm happy to like start meeting people who are, talking about this stuff and processing it because it's like I guess everyone can admit that the government's corrupt, but they still don't want to like cop to it that, you know, they're like as bad as the mafia say, like like it has to be that way. Like it then they're just using it. Yeah. And I don't know why, like it's just an example I was thinking of when it comes to marijuana and alcohol. And like a few years back when me and my friends and our kids were younger, we thought nothing of drinking beers around the kids as they're running around. And like my friends would when it comes time to smoking some weed, then you had to hide that, you know. And meanwhile, we all know that the weed is less dangerous than the alcohol. Like it's a more peaceful substance, and it's just like we all know, like alcohol is just more detrimental to society. And but yet just because it was written down that marijuana is wrong, then it's like you're insulting your own intelligence because you don't think anything about drinking in front of the kids and letting them see that. But when it comes to this other substance, which everyone has the right to put in their body whatever they want, but just the fact that you think you have to hide it because you don't want your kids to think that you're wrong. Like, so just more of that like programming, indoctrination, why we believe things like we just like believe, like we buy into this stuff, but that's because the relative. I just think it's so important for people to see it's a great seed to plant into people if they can process. It's really huge. Like it's right, like Brandon, you always say it's like the number one problem. It's why the world is so fucked up. How could something be wrong and be right at the same time? Like depending on where you are, it's or who you are. Like that's like every fucking president that's in my lifetime is a murderer. Millions, hundreds of millions of innocent people have been killed. and all we do is vote for them. And I really would love people to process that, you know, like it's not okay. It's just not. It's not okay. Like, so, you know, if I went over to like Iraq and started killing people, what would happen to me? Like, I'd be wrong. But if the government does it or sends their troops over, you know, it's just, and we're just contributing to that. We're voting for these psychopaths who are like indoctrinating people into this belief system. And you know, like I'm just happy that like we're talking about it, and hopefully people can start talking about it because it's just true. It's like it's really what's happening. It's really what's happening. So pass it on, whoever wants to speak.
I'll go real quick. So wrestling with the moral relativism thought is like benching a lot of weight. You're gonna be under a lot of pressure until you finally, you know, realize one day that hey, there is a thing called objective morality, truth. And then once that day happens, you'll just be free as a bird. Call it metamorphosis. Caterpillar turning into a butterfly. The bird finally taking that leap of faith and then flying with the wings. And it takes time to do these things. It's not just overnight, but like fear and just really learning, growing, being patient, these are all required in order to do the great work. So, you know, regarding moral relativism, I certainly was a moral relativist not too long ago, but you know, if you just keep at it, keep you know, meditating on this topic, I guarantee you will find the way, unless you're lying to yourself. And I can't do anything to help you about that, but I can practice parrhesia along with these other gentlemen and just serve you the truth as best as possible on a silver platter. So I'll pass it to whoever wants to go next.
So we're being so here's the thing, because you know, I got arrested for possession of marijuana and possession for sale of marijuana, and their, you know, legalese, you know, lingo on, you know, having these criminal charges, you know, on my record, and they completely ruined my life, you know, years afterwards. Like, you don't want to be up in the system, yet, you know, it's like we would love to just, you know, bypass a lot of these what I like to call it is the moral relativistic bitch shit, if you will. But you know, it's just my little jingle. But we all know why these things are in place, and you know why marijuana was illegal and had the brain numbing booze, you know, and all that, even though prohibition, blah blah blah. Here, oh yeah. So here's what I noticed as well, especially in America. They don't do this that much in France, you know, living out there for a dozen years. People in America, and I noticed this growing up as well, and like people love to police other people, you know, and they like to cheer on the police, you know, when they see someone getting busted for whatever, you know. I mean, like rapists and killers, and that's aside from all of that, you know, we're talking about man's law that creates, you know, division between what we can and cannot do with our own bodies that does not cause harm to other people in a sense, and it really doesn't, you know, develop one's behavior to be acting out all fucking violent towards others, hopefully, because you know others have the right to, you know, keep their asses in check. But anyways, you know, so people out there asking, I'm asking people like, well, why are you cheering that police officer out? You know, like that guy, you know, he wasn't doing anything that wrong, but they just love to see people get in trouble. They love the drama. They love the negativity. And that's what you guys were talking about earlier. I think, you know, I caught you guys talking about how just all the programming and stuff. But yeah, you know, right, Brandon? They're
Yeah,
not keeping
it's like
it light as a feather, man. What the hell?
yeah, And Derek, trust me, I know the feeling because I was arrested many, many moons ago for having like point 0.5 of weed on me. But yeah, it's like a childish mentality, man. It's like when you would tattletale on your sibling, you would tattletale on your brother, you would tattletale on your sister, or you was the teacher's pet in these government schools. That's the mentality. And like I said earlier, man, all this is a projection, and it is a mental psychosis or the mental illness of physical adults still suffering from childhood abandonment issues. Because why else would another adult be tired of telling, going to the authorities? Wouldn't a real adult either fix the problem, solve the problem, or get someone else who has the consciousness to to at least help solve that problem? Like, why do we want to escalate the problem and get mommy and daddy, hell involved? Mommy and daddy's gonna come give you a slap on the wrist. How mommy and daddy's gonna come take away your toys. You know, I'm gonna tell my mommy on you. I'm gonna tell my daddy on you. Like, that's really what hell it is. You know, you got people just narking. Just
I
A
calling
would
good
everybody
say,
leverage
and
for that, real
Debbie.
quick. You maybe think, if you don't mind, like, keeping that sacred, masculine and self-defense in a sense to make the person stop. Be like, stop doing it, otherwise I'll tell mom and dad. I mean, that's kind of a classic one. But then you kind of make agreements with them, and like, hey, like, if you like, stop doing that shit, like, I don't like it, like, if you do it again, I'm going to tell mom and dad, type of stuff. Even though it is kind of appealing to authority, I mean, the parental authority in that situation at that age is like the best authority for those kids. But yeah, sorry, does that make sense though?
well, yeah, and what I was going to jump in and say is that so much of this has to do with fear. And that's a really interesting concept because fear is not the root of evil. People want to say that. They want to try to say fear is the bad thing, when you think this all out, but fear is not the bad thing. Fear is a natural emotion. Fear is the reason a deer runs so it doesn't get eaten by a lion. That's a good thing. It protects its life. Fear is part of our built-in self-defense principle because we're afraid of dying. But what keeps, we're so used to our whole society running on fear, and parents even teaching their children based on fear. Oh, when mom gets home or when dad gets home, this is going to happen, right? Punishment. Our whole society's punishment based, as if that's the only way to do things. And so we're so used to that, so indoctrinated to that people are making all these decisions based on fear. It's like I was saying before, we're going to be willing to accept something that we know is kind of not the best, people enforcing their laws on other people because we're afraid that there's crazier people out there, and we need these sort of crazy people to keep track of these other crazier people, which the whole idea is crazy, but we're used to it, and we're afraid to change. It seems really scary. That's why we brought up the Mad Max thing, because it seems really scary. That's why someone accuses you of just making up natural law, because if you really thought it out, if you didn't believe in it, and then all of a sudden you realize it's true, that'd be kind of scary. That means all the bad shit you did is somehow or another going to come back at you somehow or another, and you're going to actually have to feel all the pain from all the things you caused. So it's easier to just keep on going and living in this false dogmatic authoritarian world we're in, rather than to actually consider there might be something to what these guys are saying, that it's wrong to steal from other people, and it's wrong to take away people's choice, because that's the divine right that we've been given by
Mm.
reality. And that would be how I would conclude. But anybody else, let's give your closing thoughts, guys, and see if we could close this meeting up in the next few minutes here after everybody gives their last thoughts.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in real quick. The whole point of this health discussion was to spark arguments, was to spark ideas, was to spark creativity in the mind. Because how not only should we be having these health debates, how we should be sharing these ideas, how we should be having these conversations, but we also have to help back these conversations up, with action. And so that's the whole point of the devil's advocate, was to spark conversation. So that should be the the most underlining principle taken hell away from this is this is about sparking hell conversation, because conversation is going to create how ideas are going to create hell emotions, and emotions should lead to right forms hell of action. And like I said in the beginning, the whole point of the devil's advocate was to spark conversation, was to spark hell ideas. So that is what I want people to take hell away from this. It is all about sparking hell conversation. So even though someone may bring up all of these three things that we talked about, that we may not like, it's still creating forms of ideas, because we know that natural law and objective morality holds weight.
Good point.
You got that hangman real quick. It's also bringing that different perspective, flip it around, and yeah, sometimes, it's asking that question in a certain way and approach to, yes, make them see something clearer and maybe, offer that solution side of things. But yeah, it just brings me back to the art of debate and being able to spark curiosity and having like meaningful conversations, and allowing space for them to kind of be a little befuddled even or whatever, and just stay calm and composed and let them do their thing. And even if they want to get, I wouldn't say want, but sometimes you get that knee-jerk reaction, and you just gotta, like, well, that's why we do the shadow work also, because we understand that projections come out from people that ain't done the work, in a sense. So that's what, like Leslie Powers, with our Dissolving the Divide, like we're taking that. Yeah, Brennan, Chris in there. Y'all be in there too later on, fellas. But yeah, just taking that, what is it, the Socratic approach as well, in a sense, asking the questions, trying to bridge gaps, come to higher understandings on fertile soil of that common ground. Get that alchemical compost up in there, hermetically sealed shit, right? Because we're trying to build a hermetically sealed society, not some furious Max or Mad Max, like shit, man. Like he hasn't done his shadow work or something, or what? Like, just kidding. I'll pass it on, but yeah, great to catch y'all for the last half hour.
Well, I guess I'll go. I want to end what I will end by saying that for me, it's everybody should play the devil's advocate when they're in thought, and I think that's a good thing. And I think if you're in a group or if you're with a friend, I find great things can happen when you're question things and you do play the devil's advocate. I think that great things can come out of that, great discussions. I love having discussions about that. And I really always bring it back to that you have to start doing the work on yourself. Deep down, you know the difference between right and wrong. You know. And I always believe that. So you have to start learning about the things that we're talking about. You have to start looking at about what objective morality is, what principles are, and then looking into natural law. You have to start looking into these things and build from that foundation if you're ever going to see a world that we're talking about, where it's not going to be a Mad Max scenario instantly, that people are going to do the work on themselves, and then that's going to project and radiate out, and then we hopefully can avoid a Mad Max scenario. So that's my advice, is to do the work on yourself. And I'll pass it on.
Yeah, just as always, thank you guys. It's great to be able to share and talk about this stuff. I think just this, what we're doing is, even though we're a group, it's all inner work. Like more and more people are able, to talk about it with each other. I think that counts as shadow work too. But yeah, just I'll pass it to Jerry and just thank you for everything, guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the truth is literally coming out of me. So I'm not like even thinking about what I'm saying. I'm just saying it. So I just want to say thank you guys for this opportunity. I love you guys. That's it.
Yeah, what a great group. You know, I love hearing everybody here. Jim, Derek, Jerry, Rick, Brandon, really appreciate your presence and your point of view. And I just hope that other people out there listen to all your wonderful points of view and consider from their own mind and inside of their own spirit what is right and what is wrong, and take that conversation on to others.
I got one quick question real quick. Did you guys talk about the trickster archetype at all?
No.
Oh, just
No, but yeah, the devil advocate does come out of the
yeah,
trickster
yeah.
archetype.
Ah,
yeah.
rats. I wish I was here
Yeah.
earlier, but no worries. Maybe for another time. But you know, it's like verbally jousting, you know, like it's
Hey,
fun.
we
And,
got
sorry.
we were talking about coming back at it next week and looking at the same thing, but kind of more from the Socratic questioning point of view. So, you know,
Cool.
that might
Well,
be
I'm
a
glad
good
I mentioned that towards the
opportunity
end. Right on.
to
Segue
bring up the trickster, come up
in the
with
mixture.
good questions, trickster in the mixture.
Yeah,
But
buddy.
yeah, thanks for listeners for hanging out. And yeah, this is the One Great Work Warriors. We're here to help teach natural law and urge people to work towards freedom and personal responsibility. Thanks for listening.